My wife texted, "Late dinner with clients. I need to close some deals. Don't wait up." I replied, "Enjoy the lobster. Tell Rick to check his stock portfolio." She called instantly, voice shaking, Rick screaming. You know that feeling when your gut knows something's wrong, but your brain's still trying to give everyone the benefit of the doubt like some kind of delusional optimist? Yeah, that was me for about 6 months straight, standing in my garage every night like some kind of grease monkey philosopher, wiping my hands on rags that were somehow dirtier than the engines I was fixing, wondering why my wife suddenly needed to work more hours than a residency doctor during flu season. I'm talking late nights, weekend emergency meetings, and enough client dinners to feed a small nation. But hey, I'm a trusting guy, or maybe just a guy who's really good at lying to himself while rebuilding carburetors. So there I was, about 7:30 on a Thursday evening, elbow deep in a 2015 Honda Civic that had more problems than my marriage, though at that point it was a close race, when my phone buzzed on the workbench. I figured it was another one of those spam calls about my car's extended warranty, which is ironic considering I literally fix cars for a living, but no, it was Sabrina, my beautiful, successful, definitely not cheating wife, with a text that read, "Late dinner with clients. Don't wait up, Red Heart." Now, let me break this down for you because I'm fluent in bullshit. Comes with the territory of dealing with customers who swear they barely tapped the pole that left their bumper in another zip code. First, the heart emoji. When your wife starts punctuating obvious lies with heart emojis, that's not romance, folks. That's damage control. It's like putting a bow on a hand grenade and calling it a gift. Second, "Don't wait up" is code for, "I'm going to be doing something I really don't want you asking questions about. So just go to bed like a good little husband and we'll pretend everything's fine over breakfast." But here's the thing about me. I might work with my hands, but I'm not stupid. I'd been noticing things. Little things at first, like how she suddenly started buying new lingerie, but I sure as hell wasn't seeing it. Or how her phone was now password protected when it used to just sit on the counter like a paperweight. Or, and this one's my favorite, how she started going to the gym 4 times a week, but somehow never seemed to actually work out, considering she'd come home looking perfect, not a hair out of place. Makeup still flawless like she'd just stepped out of a magazine shoot rather than a spin class. So I'm standing there, looking at this text, and something in my brain just clicked. You know that moment in movies where the main character finally figures out the twist, and everything suddenly makes sense? It was like that, except instead of dramatic music, I just had the sound of someone's car alarm going off in the parking lot, and the smell of motor oil mixing with my growing rage. I wiped my hands on my jeans, which Sabrina hated, by the way, always nagging me about ruining clothes, and picked up my phone. Now, I could have done what most guys do. I could have blown up her phone, demanded to know where she was, maybe even driven to her office like some unhinged stalker in a Lifetime movie. But that's amateur hour, and I didn't spend years building a successful business by making impulsive decisions when I'm angry. No, I'm more of a strategic thinker, a planner. Some might even call it petty, but I prefer methodical. So I texted back, "Enjoy the lobster. Tell Rick to check his stock portfolio." Let me explain the genius of this message, because it deserves appreciation. See, about 2 weeks earlier, I'd found a receipt in her car, just wedged between the seats like forgotten evidence, from this fancy steakhouse downtown, the kind of place that charges $40 for a potato. And on that receipt, along with 2 filet mignons and a bottle of wine that cost more than my monthly insurance payment, there was a note from the waiter. "Hope you two enjoyed your evening. Marcus." 2. Not a group. Not clients plural. 2. And Rick? Oh, Rick was her colleague from work. The guy she mentioned approximately 4,000 times more than any normal coworker. "Rick thinks this campaign will be great. Rick suggested we try this new approach. Rick's going through a divorce." Yeah, Rick. I'd never met him, but I'd seen his name pop up on her phone enough times to know his texting schedule better than my own mother's. The stock portfolio thing? Pure improvisation. I had no idea if Rick even had stocks, but it sounded threatening and vague enough to make a guilty person panic. 3 seconds. That's how long it took for my phone to ring. Not a text back. Not a "what are you talking about" message. A full-blown phone call, the kind you make when you're absolutely losing your mind and can't type fast enough to control the damage. I let it ring twice. Had to savor the moment, before answering with the most casual hello. I could muster, like I hadn't just dropped a nuclear bomb into her evening. Mark, what does that mean? Her voice was shaking, that kind of trembling that happens when someone's trying really hard not to sound guilty, but failing spectacularly. And here's the beautiful part. In the background, I could hear him. Rick, the man himself. He was yelling something that sounded like, what did he say? Mixed with what I can only describe as the audio equivalent of watching your entire life fall apart in real time. I smiled. Really smiled, probably for the first time in months. Just wanted to make sure you're having a good dinner, babe. You know how I worry about your nutrition. The sarcasm was so thick you could have used it to fill potholes. And hey, if you see Rick, tell him I said congrats on the portfolio. Diversification is important in today's market. She hung up. No goodbye, no explanation, just that sharp click of someone who knows they've been caught, but hasn't figured out their escape plan yet. I stood there in my garage, surrounded by tools and car parts and the lingering smell of dishonesty, and I laughed. Really laughed. The kind of laugh that probably made me look insane to anyone passing by, but I didn't care. Because that, my friends, is how I found out I wasn't crazy, just married to someone who thought I was too stupid to notice. Turns out, I notice everything. I just choose my moments carefully. And brother, that moment was just the beginning. Let me paint you a picture of what Sabrina and I looked like to the outside world. Because context is important when you're trying to understand how a marriage goes from couple goals to crime scene investigation in the span of about 18 months. We were that couple. You know the one. The pair that makes you simultaneously want to congratulate them and also maybe throw up a little bit because they seem too perfect to be real. We had the matching Halloween costumes, the coordinated Christmas cards, the joint Instagram account that was basically a highlight reel of our amazing life together that got more likes than either of our individual accounts ever did. People literally commented things like relationship goals and when will it be my turn under our photos like we were some kind of romantic aspirational brand. Sabrina worked in marketing for this mid-sized firm downtown that specialized in luxury goods campaigns. You know, the kind of company that convinces rich people they need a $15,000 handbag to feel complete as human beings. She was good at it too, really good, which I guess makes sense considering she'd been marketing our relationship as perfect for years when it was actually held together with duct tape and denial. She wore these power suits that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, the kind with sharp shoulders that made her look like she could fire you just by walking past your desk. And the heels, Jesus, the heels. I'm talking stilettos that could double as weapons in a self-defense class, the kind that made this clicking sound on hardwood floors that said, I'm important and you should probably get out of my way. She looked successful, sounded successful, and walked through life like someone who had their shit together in a way that made everyone else feel like they were failing at adulthood. Me? I owned a small auto shop on the east side of town called Mark's Motors. Real creative, I know. But when you're 26 and taking out a business loan, you're not exactly thinking about branding genius. I spent my days covered in grease, arguing with customers about why yes, you do actually need to change your oil regularly, and trying to keep my crew of 4 mechanics from accidentally killing each other over whose turn it was to deal with Mrs. Henderson's minivan that smelled like a combination of old French fries and broken dreams. I wore work boots that had seen more action than most people's entire shoe collections, jeans with permanent oil stains that Sabrina stopped trying to wash out after the first year, and t-shirts that advertised beer brands I didn't even drink. We were, aesthetically speaking, a complete mismatch. Her in her designer everything. Me looking like I just crawled out from under a car, which was usually accurate. But somehow it worked. At least it looked like it worked. We'd met at a mutual friend's barbecue 7 years ago, one of those summer parties where everyone's drinking beer they don't like because it's craft and pretending they enjoy small talk about jobs they hate. She thought I was funny, actually laughed at my jokes, which was apparently a rare quality she appreciated after dating a string of guys who took themselves so seriously you'd think they were auditioning for a documentary about their own importance. I thought she was gorgeous and way out of my league. The kind of woman who probably had a waiting list of dudes trying to take her to fancy restaurants I couldn't afford. But we clicked. We had this chemistry that everyone noticed, the kind where we could make each other laugh in the middle of boring social situations and have entire conversations with just looks across the room. Fast forward through a year of dating, a proposal at her favorite restaurant that I'd saved up for 3 months to afford, and a wedding that her parents paid for because my budget was more backyard potluck than elegant venue with a string quartet. We moved into a decent house in a decent neighborhood, the kind of place where people mow their lawns on Saturday mornings and wave at each other while secretly judging everyone's landscaping choices. We got a joint savings account, went to couples therapy when her temper got bad, because apparently throwing dishes during arguments isn't healthy communication. Who knew? And generally lived the life that's supposed to lead to kids, a golden retriever, and retirement in Florida. From the outside, we were crushing it. Social media showed the vacation photos, the anniversary dinners, the weekend brunches where we looked happy and in love. What it didn't show was how we'd stopped having actual conversations somewhere around year 4, replacing them with logistics about bills and whose turn it was to buy toilet paper. It didn't show how she'd roll her eyes when I made jokes at parties, or how I'd started sleeping on the couch more often than our bed because she needed space for her morning routine that apparently required the entire bedroom. Our love life had become about as exciting as watching paint dry in a beige room. Infrequent, scheduled like a dentist appointment, and executed with all the passion of someone filling out tax forms. She stopped laughing at my jokes probably 8 months before the text, which was tragic because I'm genuinely hilarious. I'm the guy who can make customers laugh even when I'm telling them their transmission is dead and it's going to cost $3,000 to fix. But Sabrina? She'd hear my best material and just stare at me like I'd spoken in a language she didn't understand, or worse, like she understood but couldn't be bothered to pretend it was funny anymore. That should have been my first real clue, honestly. When your wife stops finding you amusing, she's either depressed or checked out, and Sabrina seemed way too energetic lately to be depressed. Then there was the smell thing. Look, I work around cars all day, so I know what motor oil smells like, what brake fluid smells like, what that weird burning smell is when someone's been riding their clutch too hard. And I also know what my wife's perfume smells like. This floral thing she'd worn since we started dating, something with roses and vanilla that cost $80 a bottle and came in packaging fancier than most people's wedding gifts. But lately, when she'd come home from these late work nights, she didn't smell like her perfume. She smelled like cologne. Men's cologne. The expensive kind that guys like Rick probably buy because they think it makes them sophisticated instead of just making them smell like they bathed in a department store. When your wife starts working late 4 nights a week and comes home smelling like someone else's husband, you start connecting dots. Even if you're not great at math, which I'm not, that's why I have an accountant, you can figure out that something doesn't add up. The business trips that suddenly multiplied, the phone calls she'd take in another room, the way she'd angle her phone away from me when texting like she was guarding classified government secrets instead of just confirming dinner plans. I'm not an idiot, despite what my high school guidance counselor might have thought when I chose auto mechanics over college. I was just choosing to be patient, to gather information, to make absolutely sure before I did anything that couldn't be undone. Because here's the thing about being married to someone for 6 years, you know them. You know their patterns, their tells, their lies. And Sabrina was lying. She was lying about where she was, who she was with, and what she was doing. And I was done pretending I didn't notice. Here's something they don't teach you in marriage counseling or those dumb self-help books that Sabrina used to leave around the house like subtle hints that I should work on myself. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do when you know you're being cheated on is absolutely nothing. At least not immediately. See, most guys in my position would have gone full caveman mode, kicked down doors, thrown accusations around like confetti at a parade, maybe even confronted the other guy in some parking lot showdown that ends with someone's face meeting the pavement and the other person meeting a lawyer. That's the emotional response, the one that feels good for about 30 seconds until you realize you've just handed your cheating spouse all the ammunition they need to paint you as the crazy, jealous, unstable one. And I wasn't about to give Sabrina that satisfaction. No, sir. If this marriage was going down, it was going down on my terms, with all the evidence neatly organized in a folder like I was preparing for the world's most depressing presentation. Besides, I'm a mechanic. I diagnose problems for a living. You don't just start randomly replacing parts because you think maybe that's what's wrong. You run tests, you gather data, you figure out exactly what's broken before you start tearing things apart. Same principle applies to marriages, turns out, except the parts are more expensive and the warranty expired about 3 years ago. So I became a detective. Not the cool kind with a trench coat and a magnifying glass. More like the pathetic kind who checks their spouse's credit card statements while eating cereal at 2 in the morning and questioning every life choice that led to this moment. But effective, nonetheless. I started small, because going full FBI surveillance mode right out of the gate is how you get caught, and getting caught before you have the full picture is amateur hour. I'm talking about just paying attention, really paying attention, to the things I'd been unconsciously ignoring for months, because acknowledging them would have meant admitting my marriage was circling the drain faster than water in a broken garbage disposal. The receipts were my first solid evidence, and honestly, Sabrina made it almost too easy. She wasn't even trying to hide them, just leaving them in her car like breadcrumbs in a really depressing fairy tale where the happy ending involves a good divorce lawyer. There was the steakhouse receipt I mentioned earlier, $247 for dinner for two, paid for on a Tuesday night when she texted me she was working late on the Henderson campaign. Then there was a receipt from this boutique hotel downtown, the kind of place that charges $400 a night and has those fluffy robes that people definitely steal. The date on that one? The same weekend she'd told me she was at a marketing conference in Chicago. I'd even driven her to the airport, watched her walk through security with her rolling suitcase and her travel coffee mug, playing the part of the supportive husband while she was apparently just playing me. But my personal favorite, the one that really sealed the deal, was a receipt from a jewelry store. Not just any jewelry store, but Tiffany's. Now, I don't know what Rick bought her, because the receipt just showed an amount, $850. But I know for damn sure I've never bought my wife anything from Tiffany's because I'm not made of money, and also because every time I've suggested jewelry for birthdays or anniversaries, she's told me she'd rather have practical gifts like kitchen appliances or contributions to her IRA. But apparently when Rick suggests jewelry, it's romantic. When I suggest it, it's a waste of money. The double standards in this situation were really something special. Then there were the photos. Oh man, the photos. See, Sabrina was big on social media, had like 3,000 Instagram followers who apparently cared deeply about her morning smoothie recipes and her authentic life updates that were about as authentic as a $3 bill. She was always posting pictures of everything: her lunch, her office, her shoes, the sky when it looked particularly photogenic. But I started noticing that her business trip photos were weird. She'd post shots of hotel lobbies and conference rooms, sure, but never with other people. Never with the co-workers she was supposedly traveling with for these important client meetings. Just empty spaces with captions like "grinding never stops" and "building the dream," with a bunch of hashtags that made me want to throw my phone across the room. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I reverse image searched a few of them. Turns out, that conference in Seattle she posted about, those photos were from a resort in Napa Valley, about 3 hours away from where she claimed to be. The team dinner photo that showed a fancy restaurant table? I found the same image on the restaurant's website. It was from their promotional materials. She wasn't even using original photos, just stealing them from the internet, like she was catfishing her own Instagram followers. The audacity was almost impressive, in a sociopathic kind of way. But the real smoking gun, the piece of evidence that moved this from "I think something's wrong" to "I know exactly what's happening," was an email I found on our shared iPad. Now, before you judge me for snooping, let me just say that she was the one who insisted we share an iPad for household management purposes, synced to both our email accounts so we could coordinate schedules and grocery lists and all that domestic partnership nonsense. So technically, I wasn't snooping. I was just using our shared device and happened to notice an email notification pop up at the exact wrong, or right, depending on your perspective, moment. The subject line read, "Can't wait for tomorrow night." The sender? Rick Henderson. Yeah, Henderson. As in the client whose campaign she'd been working on for the past 6 months. As in the guy whose name came up so often in conversation that I'd started mentally adding him to our Christmas card list as a joke. I opened it. And look, I know that's technically a violation of privacy, but so is sleeping with your coworker while your husband makes you dinner every night. So let's call it even. And holy hell, it was bad. Not just bad, like romance novel level cringe bad. "Can you bring that black dress again?" it started. "I can't stop thinking about how you looked in it last week." Marcus at the restaurant asked if we were celebrating something special, and I wanted to say yes, the fact that she exists, but I just smiled and said anniversary. He gave us free champagne. We should go back. It went on like that for 3 more paragraphs, each one more nauseating than the last, full of references to inside jokes I wasn't part of and plans for future rendezvous that apparently I was supposed to remain blissfully ignorant about while I rotated tires and balanced checkbooks. I took screenshots. Lots of them. Saved them to a cloud drive she didn't have access to, printed copies, and stored them in my toolbox at work where she'd never think to look. I documented everything. Dates, times, locations, amounts spent. I created a spreadsheet, because apparently that's what betrayal turns you into. The kind of person who organizes infidelity data in Excel with color-coded categories. Green for confirmed dates, yellow for suspicious activity, red for definitely cheating, have proof. By the end of week 3 of my investigation, that spreadsheet had more red cells than a biology textbook. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because here's what I learned from years of running a business. Timing is everything. You don't show your hand until you've stacked the deck completely in your favor. You don't reveal what you know until you've prepared for every possible response. You definitely don't start a fight until you've already won the war. So I smiled. I cooked dinner. I asked about her day with genuine sounding interest while mentally calculating exactly how much of our joint savings account I could legally move before she noticed. And when she texted me that Thursday night, late dinner with clients. Don't wait up, Red Heart. I knew exactly where she was, who she was with, and probably what she was ordering based on past receipt patterns. So I sent my reply about lobster and stock portfolios, hit send, and waited for the explosion I'd been carefully engineering for weeks. The phone call that came 3 seconds later, that was just the sound of my patience paying off and her lies finally catching up to her. And brother, it was the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. The sound of her car pulling into the driveway at 11:53 p.m. Yes, I checked the clock, because at this point I was documenting everything like I was building a legal case, which technically I was. Had this quality to it that I'd never noticed before. Kind of like when you hear a song you've listened to 1,000 times, but suddenly you catch a lyric that changes the whole meaning. Her BMW made this specific chirping sound when she locked it, and that night it sounded less like a car alarm and more like the death rattle of our marriage. Poetic, right? I should write greeting cards for divorced people. Sorry your spouse is a lying cheater. Here's a picture of a sunset and some generically drew about new beginnings. I was sitting in the living room with all the lights off except for the TV, which was playing some late-night rerun of a cop show where everyone's problems get solved in 42 minutes minus commercial breaks. Real life should come with that kind of convenient resolution timeline. I'd positioned myself on the couch with a beer I hadn't actually drunk, just held it like a prop because I wanted to look casual, not like a man who'd spent the last 4 hours planning psychological warfare while online shopping for new deadbolts. The front door opened with that specific creaking sound that I'd been meaning to fix for 6 months, but now felt oddly appropriate for the horror movie my life had become. Still up? Sabrina's voice came from the entryway, and I could hear her kicking off those ridiculous heels that probably cost more than my truck payment. She sounded tired, but also nervous, like someone who'd just robbed a bank and was trying to act normal at the grocery store checkout. There was this slight edge to her voice, a tremor that she was trying to cover with casual friendliness, like we were roommates discussing the weather instead of a married couple where one person had just blown up the other person's whole secret life with a single text message. Couldn't sleep, I said, not turning away from the TV, even though I couldn't tell you what was happening on screen if someone offered me $1,000. You know how it is. Hard to relax when the Dow Jones is this unstable. Really volatile market conditions lately. Makes a man nervous about his investments. I let that last word hang in the air like a fart in an elevator. Impossible to ignore and deeply uncomfortable for everyone involved. I could feel her standing in the doorway, could practically hear the gears turning in her head as she tried to figure out if I was making a pointed comment or just being weird. She settled on the latter, because people who are lying always want to believe they're getting away with it. The Dow Jones. Since when do you follow the stock market? She laughed, but it sounded wrong. Like a recording of a laugh played at the wrong speed. You still mad about that time I suggested we invest in mutual funds, and you said you'd rather invest in lottery tickets? People change, I said, finally looking at her. And Jesus, she looked guilty. Like comically, obviously guilty. Her makeup was smudged in that way that happens when you've been doing things that smudge makeup. Her hair was slightly messed up despite her obvious attempts to fix it in the car. And this is my favorite part. She was wearing her blouse inside out. Not fully inside out. Just the tag was showing at the back of her neck like a little flag of infidelity waving hello. How was dinner? Fine. Good. You know, typical client dinner stuff. Boring presentations, overpriced wine, the usual. She was walking toward the kitchen now, probably to avoid eye contact, which was smart because I was staring at her like a prosecutor who already knows the defendant is guilty but wants to watch them lie on the stand anyway. We talked about the campaign strategy for the spring launch. Very productive. Rick thinks we should pivot toward. Rick. I said his name like it was a cough, just interrupting her mid-sentence because I could, and because watching her flinch was deeply satisfying in a petty way that I'm not proud of, but also absolutely am. How is good old Rick? His portfolio doing okay? I know the market's been rough on some people lately. She stopped in the doorway to the kitchen, her back still to me, and I watched her shoulders tense up like she'd just stepped on a Lego barefoot. His portfolio? Mark, what are you talking about? Are you feeling okay? You're being really weird. The deflection tactic, classic move. When caught off guard, pretend the other person is the crazy one. I'd seen customers use this strategy when confronted about lying about their car maintenance. Sir, you haven't changed your oil in 15,000 miles. Why are you being so aggressive about oil? Are you okay? I'm great, actually. Never better. Just making conversation about mutual acquaintances and their financial well-being. Isn't that what married couples do? Chat about their respective colleagues' investment strategies. I took a fake sip of my warm beer, maintaining eye contact even though she still wasn't looking at me. You smell different. New perfume. What? No. Same one I always wear. You're being really weird tonight, Mark. I'm going to bed. She practically ran up the stairs, and I heard our bedroom door close with more force than necessary. Not quite a slam, but definitely a, I need to be alone to panic in private, kind of close. I stayed on the couch for another hour, finishing the cop show and starting another one, giving her time to spiral in whatever web of anxiety she was probably weaving up there. When I finally went upstairs around 1 a.m., she was pretending to be asleep. I could tell because her breathing was all wrong. Too controlled, too purposeful. Real sleep breathing is random and sometimes involves light snoring that she always denied doing even though I had recordings. This was theatrical sleep breathing, the kind actors do in movies when they're faking being unconscious. I got into bed without saying anything, turned off the light, and lay there in the dark listening to her pretend to be asleep while I pretended to believe she was asleep. Marriage is just layers of pretending, really. It's pretending all the way down until eventually someone gets tired and drops the act. The next morning was Academy Award worthy. I woke up to the sound of her in the kitchen, and when I came downstairs, she'd made pancakes. Pancakes. We hadn't had a breakfast that wasn't cereal or toast in probably 6 months. But here she was, flipping pancakes like we were auditioning for a cooking show called Couples Who Lie for a Living. She'd even put on makeup and done her hair, looking put together in that way that takes effort, but is supposed to look effortless. Morning, she said with this brightness that belonged in a toothpaste commercial. I thought I'd make us a nice breakfast. We never do this anymore. Isn't this nice? Just us, pancakes, quality time. She was talking too fast, words tumbling out like she couldn't control the speed, and her hands were shaking as she flipped a pancake that ended up more on the stovetop than in the pan. Lovely, I said, pouring myself coffee and watching her try to scrape burnt pancake off the burner. What's the occasion? Did someone die? Win the lottery? Have a mental breakdown? I was being mean. I knew I was being mean, but I'd earned a little meanness after months of being played like a fiddle at a hoedown. Can a wife just make her husband breakfast without it being suspicious? She laughed, and that laugh, man, that laugh. It cracked right in the middle, broke apart like cheap glass hitting tile, and she tried to cover it by coughing and turning back to the stove. You're still being weird from last night. Maybe you should take the day off, stay home, relax. You've been working so hard lately. Translation, please stay away from anything that might give you more information about my affair. I smiled, syrupy sweet, and sat down at the table. Can't. Got 3 cars coming in today, including Mrs. Henderson's van. You remember Mrs. Henderson, right? Her husband Rick does something with marketing, I think. I hadn't mentioned that her affair partner shared a name with my elderly customer's husband until that moment, and watching her face cycle through confusion, panic, and forced neutrality was worth every second of sleep I'd lost. "Different Rick," she said quietly, sliding a plate of pancakes in front of me that looked like they'd been through a war. "There are lots of Ricks in the world, Mark." "True," I agreed, cutting into breakfast and pretending not to notice how her hands were still shaking or how she couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Lots of Ricks. Lots of lies, too. Worlds full of both." I took a bite of pancake that tasted like anxiety and burnt butter. "These are great, by the way. Really great. We should do this more often. You know, before things change." She sat down across from me with her own plate, but didn't eat, just pushed food around like a kid avoiding vegetables. And I could absolutely tell, that she knew I knew. She just didn't know how much I knew, what evidence I had, or what I was planning to do about it. The uncertainty was killing her, eating her alive from the inside, while she tried to maintain this facade of normalcy over pancakes neither of us wanted. Spoiler alert, I knew everything. Every lie, every date, every receipt, every text. I had documentation that would make a private investigator weep with professional pride. But I wasn't ready to show my cards yet. Not when watching her squirm was this entertaining. You know what's wild about the internet? It's made stalking socially acceptable as long as you call it research. 20 years ago, if you wanted to find out about someone, you had to hire a private investigator or ask around town like some kind of noir detective in a trench coat. Now, 3 clicks and I know where you went to high school, what your dog's name is, and whether you prefer Starbucks or Dunkin'. It's creepy when you think about it, but also incredibly useful when your wife is having an affair and you need to figure out if the other guy's spouse might want to join forces like some kind of betrayed partner support group / revenge squad. Finding Rick's wife was embarrassingly easy. I typed Rick Henderson marketing into Facebook. Because let's be honest, everyone over 30 is still on Facebook pretending they use it for anything other than arguing about politics and looking up people from high school. And boom, there he was. Profile picture of him looking like exactly the kind of guy who'd have an affair. Professionally attractive in that generic way where you can't quite pin down any memorable features. Wearing a polo shirt that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Smiling with too many teeth like a game show host. His relationship status said, married to Erica Henderson, which was thoughtful of him to advertise considering he was actively betraying that status approximately 4 nights a week at expensive restaurants. I clicked on Erica's profile, and honestly, I felt bad for her immediately. Her bio read, coffee, cats, and cleaning up my husband's messes. HR manager at Westfield Associates. Probably tired. The probably tired part got me. That's the kind of humor you develop when life has been beating you down, but you're too stubborn to admit defeat. Her profile picture showed a woman in her mid-30s with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, holding a coffee mug that said, "I can't adult today," wearing what looked like the universal uniform of the exhausted, yoga pants, and an oversized sweatshirt. She had kind eyes, the kind that probably saw the best in people even when they didn't deserve it. She looked like someone who'd been living parallel to me in this nightmare, without knowing we were in the same horror movie. I spent about 20 minutes debating whether to message her. On one hand, maybe she didn't know about the affair, and telling her would blow up her life in a way that couldn't be undone. On the other hand, she deserved to know her husband was spending their money on hotel rooms and jewelry for my wife, while she was probably at home believing his lies about working late. In the end, I decided ignorance might be bliss, but informed decisions are better, even when the information sucks worse than a vacuum cleaner convention. So I sent her a message. Nothing dramatic, just, "Hi Erica. I know this is weird, but I'm married to one of your husband's coworkers, and I think we need to talk. This isn't spam, and I'm not crazy, or at least not yet. Can we meet for coffee?" I hit send before I could overthink it, then stared at my phone like it was going to explode. The delivered notification popped up, then the seen notification, and then I watched those 3 little dots that mean someone's typing appear and disappear about 5 times before a message finally came through. Tomorrow, Murphy's Diner on 5th, 10 a.m. Come alone and bring proof of whatever you're about to tell me. Short, direct, no nonsense. I liked her already. Anyone who leads with "bring proof" is someone who's been lied to enough times to develop healthy skepticism. We were going to get along just fine. Murphy's Diner was one of those classic American establishments that looks like it hasn't been updated since 1987 and takes pride in that fact. Red vinyl booths with duct tape covering the cracks, a jukebox in the corner that probably only played songs from the 70s, and a waitress named Dolores who'd definitely seen some stuff and wasn't impressed by any of it. The coffee tasted like it had been brewed sometime during the Reagan administration and reheated every morning since. But it was cheap, and they didn't rush you, which made it the perfect location for the kind of conversation where you tell a stranger that both your spouses are garbage humans. I got there 15 minutes early because I'm the kind of person who shows up to appointments on time and then sits in the parking lot having an anxiety attack before going in. I'd brought my tablet loaded with all the screenshots, receipts, and photos I'd collected, organized chronologically because I'm nothing if not thorough when documenting the destruction of my marriage. I ordered coffee that tasted like regret and disappointment, which felt thematically appropriate, and waited. Erica walked in at exactly 10 a.m., which told me she was also the type who valued punctuality, and we locked eyes immediately in that way people do when they're meeting internet strangers and trying to figure out if they're about to have coffee or become a true crime podcast episode. She looked tired, more tired than her profile picture suggested, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide and the posture of someone who'd been carrying weight that wasn't physical for way too long. She slid into the booth across from me without introducing herself, just said, "Show me," which I respected. No small talk, no pleasantries, just straight to the evidence. I turned my tablet around and started with the restaurant receipts, watching her face carefully for reactions. She didn't flinch at first, just studied each image like she was reading a technical manual, nodding occasionally like things were clicking into place in her head. "The steakhouse," she said, pointing at one receipt. "He told me he was taking a client there. Said it was a business dinner for someone from out of town." Her voice was flat, emotionless in that way people get when they're trying not to break down in public. "What date was this?" "March 22nd, I said. "My wife told me she was working late on a campaign pitch. Guess they were pitching something to each other." The joke fell flat, literally flat, like a pancake that had been sitting too long. But Erica's mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "He was supposed to be in Dallas that week," she said quietly, scrolling through more photos. When she got to the hotel receipt, she stopped, zooming in on the date. "This one. I remember this one. He called me from the hotel in Dallas to say goodnight to our daughter. I heard traffic in the background and thought it was weird. Because he said he was in his room. But She trailed off, and I watched her swallow hard, fighting against something. Tears, rage, maybe both. "Convinced yourself you were imagining things." I finished for her. "Yeah, I did that for about 6 months. Turns out our imaginations were just really good at pattern recognition." She looked up at me then, really looked at me, and I saw my own exhaustion reflected back. We were two people who'd been gaslit so thoroughly we'd started questioning our own sanity. And finding someone else who understood that without explanation was like discovering you weren't alone in a haunted house after all. There was another person there, equally confused about why the doors kept opening by themselves. When I showed her photos of Sabrina and Rick at that business dinner, I said, pulling up the image I'd taken from Sabrina's Instagram, the one she'd posted and quickly deleted, "Your husband told you he was where exactly?" Erica laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that's actually crying in disguise. "He said he was in Dallas, working late, closing a deal." She shook her head, and Dolores appeared with more terrible coffee that neither of us wanted, but both of us needed. "I'm such an idiot." "You're not an idiot," I said, and I meant it. "You're just someone who trusted the person you married. That's not stupid. That's how it's supposed to work. They're the idiots for throwing it away." I paused, stirring sugar into coffee I wasn't going to drink. "And my wife told me she was closing deals. Turns out she was just opening them. Wrong kind of deals entirely." That got a Real laugh, small but genuine, and we both sat there for a moment appreciating the absurdity of our situation. Two people who'd never met, connected by the fact that our spouses had found each other before we did. It was like a really depressing version of a romantic comedy, except nobody was learning valuable lessons about love, and the only happy ending involved paperwork and lawyers. "So what now?" Erica asked, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug like it was the only solid thing in a world that had gone liquid. "Do we confront them? Get lawyers? Post it on Facebook?" She said that last part like a joke, but I could tell part of her was seriously considering it. Now, I said, we don't plan revenge out loud because that seems legally problematic. But we also don't need to. Sometimes the universe handles these things itself. Sometimes people who think they're getting away with something discover that karma has Wi-Fi, and it's been tracking them the whole time. We exchanged numbers, promised to keep each other updated, and sat there for another hour drinking bad coffee and trading stories about the red flags we'd ignored, the lies we believed, and the futures we'd imagined that now existed only as cautionary tales. We didn't plan anything specific that day, didn't need to. Just knowing someone else understood, someone else had receipts and screenshots, and that same sick feeling in their stomach when their spouse said they were working late, that was enough. For now. There's an old saying about keeping your friends close and your enemies closer, but nobody tells you what to do when your enemy is also the person you share a bathroom with and who keeps stealing your phone charger. The answer, I discovered, is to become the world's greatest actor while simultaneously executing the kind of strategic planning that would make military generals nod with approval. I'm talking full method acting, Daniel Day-Lewis level commitment to the role of husband who definitely doesn't know his wife is cheating and definitely isn't planning anything. It started the Monday after my coffee meeting with Erica when I showed up at home with flowers. Not just any flowers. I went to that expensive florist downtown that Sabrina always pointed at wistfully when we drove past. The one that charges $30 for roses that'll die in a week, just like the cheaper ones, but somehow look more sophisticated while doing it. I walked through the door at 6 p.m. holding this massive bouquet of purple and white flowers that I couldn't name if my life depended on it, and the look on Sabrina's face was priceless. Confusion, suspicion, and a hint of fear all mixed together like a cocktail of emotions she wasn't prepared to drink. "What's this for?" she asked, taking the flowers like they might explode. Which, metaphorically speaking, they kind of were going to, just not yet. I'd timed the detonation for later. "Does a man need a reason to buy his wife flowers?" I said, kissing her cheek with the enthusiasm of a husband in a commercial for allergy medication. "I just wanted to remind you that I appreciate you. All those late nights you've been working, all the effort you put into your career, I don't say it enough, but I'm proud of you, babe." The word babe came out smooth as butter, no hint of the sarcasm I was drowning in internally. I should have been a politician. Or a con artist. Apparently, I had a real talent for lying when properly motivated by betrayal. She actually teared up, stood there in our kitchen holding $29 worth of dying plant matter, and got misty-eyed like I'd just proposed again instead of setting the stage for the greatest gotcha moment since Maury Povich started doing paternity tests on daytime television. "That's really sweet, Mark. I've been feeling kind of disconnected from you lately, and this means a lot." The irony of her saying we'd been disconnected while she was actively connecting with Rick in hotel rooms across the city wasn't lost on me, but I just smiled and suggested we order her favorite Thai food for dinner. For the next 2 weeks, I was husband of the year material. I cooked dinner when she worked late, which was often, shockingly, and never once asked suspicious questions about why she needed to work late so frequently or why her idea of business casual apparently included lingerie I'd never seen before. I complimented her new haircut, the one she got without mentioning it beforehand, and claimed she'd just decided to do spontaneously, even though I'd found a text from Rick saying he loved her hair longer but was excited to see the change. I even pretended to care about her team retreat, asked questions about the itinerary, nodded enthusiastically when she explained the trust-building exercises they'd be doing. Real trust-building would have been not sleeping with her coworker, but I kept that observation to myself. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I was executing what I like to call Operation Financial Independence, which sounds better than Operation Make Sure My Cheating Wife Can't Bankrupt Me in the Divorce. I'd consulted with a lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chun who'd taken one look at my evidence folder and actually said, "Oh honey," in a tone that was equal parts sympathy and professional excitement. Turns out, documentation is everything in divorce proceedings, and I had enough documentation to wallpaper our bedroom. Not that I would, because I was planning to keep the bedroom, but you get the idea. Patricia helped me understand that in our state, anything I did with assets before filing for divorce needed to be careful, strategic, and most importantly, legal. So I didn't empty our joint accounts like some kind of movie villain. I slowly, methodically, transferred my half plus a bit extra to cover the money she'd been spending on her extracurricular activities. I changed passwords on accounts that were primarily mine, switched the utilities into my name alone, and this was the big one. I called in a favor from my real estate attorney buddy, Dave, who helped me discover that our house was actually only in my name because of some paperwork quirk from when we'd bought it, and Sabrina had terrible credit at the time. She'd been making the mortgage payments with me, sure, but legally speaking, the house was mine. I'd forgotten about this detail because who remembers their mortgage paperwork specifics from 6 years ago? But Dave remembered, bless him, and after reviewing everything confirmed that unless Sabrina could prove she'd contributed significantly to the down payment, which she hadn't, because her parents had given us money as a wedding gift that went into my account first, she didn't have automatic claim to half the house. Was this morally gray? Maybe. Did I care at this point? Absolutely not. She wanted to play games. I'd learned the rulebook and discovered I was better at it than she was. The really beautiful part was watching her relax. Every compliment I gave her, every dinner I cooked, every time I kissed her goodnight without asking where she'd really been, she loosened up a little more. Started to believe she was getting away with it, that I was just the oblivious husband who asked no questions and threatened no consequences. She got comfortable, and comfortable people make mistakes. They get sloppy. They stop covering their tracks as carefully. They schedule romantic getaways on their work calendar that syncs to the shared iPad they forgot about, which is how I discovered her next business trip. Thursday morning, I was checking our grocery list on the iPad because I'd actually started doing the grocery shopping too, really leaning into this perfect husband thing, when a calendar notification popped up. Phoenix Conference, 3 days. The dates were next weekend, Friday through Sunday, and the location was listed as the Fairmont Scottsdale. I did what any reasonable person would do. I Googled it. 5-star resort, spa services, golf course, romantic dinner options overlooking the desert. Real business conference vibes. Definitely not the kind of place you go to attend PowerPoint presentations about marketing strategies. I wrote the dates down, closed the iPad, and went to work whistling. Actually whistling, like some kind of cartoon character who'd just hatched a plan. My employees thought I'd lost my mind. "Boss, you okay?" Tommy asked, watching me reorganize the tool wall while humming. "You're being weird. Like, weirder than usual." "Tommy, my friend," I said, hanging up a wrench with the precision of a man who'd found his purpose. "I'm better than okay. I'm great. I'm phenomenal. I'm living my best life." He backed away slowly, probably wondering if I'd been drinking, but I didn't care. I had a plan forming, and it was beautiful in its simplicity. That evening, Sabrina brought up the Phoenix trip over dinner, leftover Thai food because I was still playing the supportive husband card. "So, I have to go to Phoenix next weekend," she said, trying to sound annoyed about it like business travel was such a burden and not a convenient excuse to spend 3 days with her boyfriend at a luxury resort. "It's a conference about digital marketing trends. Mandatory attendance, super boring, but you know how it is." I nodded sympathetically, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand like I wasn't internally planning her downfall. "That's tough, babe. But hey, at least Phoenix is beautiful this time of year. You should try to enjoy it between sessions. Maybe get a spa treatment or something. Expense it to the company." I smiled, all innocence and support. "You work so hard. You deserve a little relaxation." She smiled back, and I could see the relief in her eyes. Permission granted, guilt absolved, husband successfully deceived. "You're the best, you know that? Some guys would be upset about their wife traveling so much for work, but you just get it. You understand how important my career is to me." "I understand a lot of things," I said, which was the truest statement I'd made in weeks. "I just want you to be happy, Sabrina. Whatever makes you happy." The double meaning sailed right over her head like a paper airplane made of irony. After dinner, while she was upstairs already packing 5 days early, because apparently she was that excited about this conference, I pulled out my laptop and booked a flight. Same airline, same flight number, same destination, different name on the ticket because I'm listed as Mark Anthony Castellano on my license, and I bought the ticket as M.A. Castellano, which wouldn't ping any recognition if she somehow checked the passenger manifest, which she wouldn't because she thought I was an idiot. Friday morning to Sunday evening, Phoenix, Arizona. I booked a room at a Holiday Inn about 10 minutes from her fancy resort because I'm practical, and also because the Fairmont would have bankrupted me and I needed to save money for lawyer fees. I rented a car, packed a bag with my camera, the good one I used for taking pictures of custom paint jobs at the shop, with the zoom lens that could photograph a license plate from across a parking lot. And I felt, for the first time in months, like I had control over something. The morning she left for the airport, I drove her. Loaded her suitcase in the trunk. Noticed she'd packed the black dress Rick had mentioned in his email, real subtle there, and kissed her goodbye at departures. Have fun at your conference, I said, pulling her close like a loving husband would. Don't forget to expense the champagne. You've earned it. She laughed, actually laughed, kissed me back, and walked into the airport with her rolling suitcase and her lies, completely unaware that in approximately 6 hours, I'd be on a plane right behind her. Different row, same destination, unified purpose. Watching her entire double life collapse in real time with professional quality photographic evidence. She smiled at me through the airport window, waving one last time before disappearing into the crowd. That smile, God, that smile. It was the smile of someone who thought they'd won, who believed they were getting away with everything, who had no idea the trap was already set and they were walking right into it. I smiled back, waved, got in my truck, and drove home to finish packing. Game on, Sabrina. Game on. There's something surreal about sitting 4 rows behind your wife on a plane while she's heading to meet her lover, and she has absolutely no idea you're there. It's like being a ghost, except instead of haunting a mansion, you're haunting seat 17B in economy class, drinking a $7 ginger ale, and contemplating whether the peanuts they just handed you are worth the effort of opening the package. The answer is no, but I opened them anyway because I needed something to do with my hands besides grip my phone like I was trying to strangle it. Sabrina was in seat 13C, window seat, because she always insisted on window seats, claimed the aisle gave her anxiety about people bumping her when they walked past, which I'd always thought was a weird thing to be anxious about, but now realized was probably just her being high maintenance about everything. She'd boarded before me, walking down that narrow airplane aisle with her carry-on and her neck pillow, and her complete confidence that her husband was currently at home watching ESPN and eating chips for dinner like the oblivious idiot she thought I was. I'd waited until the final boarding call to get on, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses even though we were indoors, looking like either a celebrity trying to go incognito or a divorced dad going through a midlife crisis. Could have been either, honestly. The flight attendant doing the safety demonstration could have been speaking ancient Greek for all I absorbed. Something about exits and flotation devices and putting your own mask on first, which felt like a metaphor for my entire marriage. I'd been so busy making sure Sabrina was okay that I'd forgotten to secure my own oxygen supply, and now we were both crashing. Except I had a parachute, and she had no idea the ground was coming up fast. I spent the first 20 minutes of the flight pretending to read a Sky Mall magazine from 2019 that someone had left in the seat pocket, looking at products nobody needs like a hot dog toaster and a garden gnome that's also a sprinkler, while occasionally glancing up to see the back of Sabrina's head 4 rows ahead. She was texting someone. I could see the glow of her phone screen reflected in the window, and I would have bet my entire tool collection that it was Rick, probably something gross and romantic about how excited she was to see him. The thought made me want to throw my peanuts at her head, but that seemed like the kind of behavior that gets you on a no-fly list, and I needed to maintain my cover as just some random passenger who definitely isn't stalking his cheating wife. The guy next to me, middle-aged, balding, wearing a polo shirt with a corporate logo I didn't recognize, tried to make small talk about 20 minutes into the flight. Business or pleasure? He asked, the universal airplane conversation starter that I'm pretty sure is taught in some secret manual they give you when you turn 35. Little bit of both, I said, which was accurate. The business of catching my wife cheating was definitely giving me pleasure, in a dark, vindictive sort of way that probably meant I should add more therapy sessions to my post-divorce budget. You? Sales conference, he sighed. Like this explained everything about his life choices and why he looked vaguely dead inside. Third one this quarter. My wife thinks I'm having an affair with all these trips. He laughed, oblivious to the irony bomb he'd just dropped into my lap. I keep telling her, honey, if I was having an affair, I'd pick somewhere more exciting than Phoenix. I nearly choked on my ginger ale. Yeah, I managed. That would be pretty stupid. Having an affair in Phoenix. Real stupid. I glanced at Sabrina's head, still 4 rows up, still glowing from her phone screen. People who do that probably deserve whatever's coming to them. The rest of the flight passed in a strange blur of me pretending to sleep while actually watching Sabrina like a creepy surveillance hawk, listening to the engine noise and the crying baby in row 9 and thinking about how my life had become an episode of a reality show I never auditioned for. When we started our descent, I felt my stomach drop, not from the altitude change, but from the realization that this was really happening. I was really about to watch my wife meet her boyfriend at the airport. I was really about to document the evidence that would end my marriage. There was no going back from this, no pretending I didn't know, no more playing the oblivious husband. Good. I was tired of playing that role anyway. The reviews were terrible and the pay was worse. We landed with that weird, bumpy touchdown that makes everyone hold their breath like we're surprised the plane actually made it. And then came the part I'd been dreading. The awkward shuffle of everyone standing up at once to grab their bags from the overhead compartments even though the door isn't even open yet, and we're all just going to stand there hunched over like a convention of the world's most impatient hunchbacks. I stayed seated, let the rows ahead of me clear out, watched Sabrina grab her bag, the expensive one I'd bought her for Christmas last year, which felt like another small betrayal in a list of increasingly larger ones, and walk off the plane without once looking back. I followed at a distance, keeping at least 15 people between us as we walked through the terminal. Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport is huge, which worked in my favor. Lots of crowds to blend into, lots of corners to lurk behind like a noir detective, except, instead of a fedora, I was wearing a Phoenix Suns cap I'd bought specifically for this trip to help blend in with the locals. I watched her check her phone, smile at whatever message she'd received, and speed up her pace toward baggage claim. And that's where I saw him. Rick Henderson, in the flesh, standing by the baggage carousel like he was waiting for the love of his life instead of someone else's wife. He was taller than I'd expected from his Facebook photos, maybe 6'2", with that kind of gym fit build that comes from having a personal trainer and enough free time to actually use them. He wore khakis and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking like he'd stepped out of a Banana Republic catalog. And his face lit up when he saw Sabrina in a way that made me want to punch him and also maybe cry a little bit, because that's how he used to look at me. Back when we were happy, back before everything got complicated and cold. She practically ran to him. Actually ran. Her heels clicking on the airport floor like some kind of romantic movie scene, except the genre was more psychological thriller than romantic comedy. And he caught her in a hug that lifted her off the ground. They kissed, right there in baggage claim. The kind of kiss that makes other people look away awkwardly because it's too intimate for public space. The kind of kiss I hadn't gotten from her in probably 2 years. He spun her around. She laughed, and I stood 20 feet away behind a support column taking pictures with my phone like a private investigator, except sadder, because I wasn't getting paid for this, just traumatized. My hands were shaking, I realized. Actually trembling like I'd had too much coffee. Except I hadn't had any coffee. Just airline ginger ale and a growing sense of rage that felt like it was going to crack my chest open from the inside. I took a breath, deep, steady, the kind they teach you in anger management classes I'd never attended but probably should have, and kept photographing. Wide shots, close-ups, different angles. Professional quality documentation of my marriage ending in Terminal 4 of Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. They collected their bags. Rick had apparently packed light, just to carry on, while Sabrina waited for her checked luggage like she was planning to stay a while, and walked toward the exit holding hands. Holding hands. Like teenagers. Like people who weren't actively destroying 2 marriages, and probably Rick's career once his company found out he was sleeping with a colleague. I followed them to the parking garage, watched Rick open the passenger door of a rented Mercedes, because of course he rented a Mercedes, probably on the company card, and kept my distance as they drove out. I'd already arranged my own rental, a basic sedan that screamed forgettable and cost about 1/10 of what Rick's probably did. I picked it up, programmed the Fairmont Scottsdale into my GPS even though I'd already memorized the route, and drove the 25 minutes to the resort, maintaining a safe following distance like I'd learned from watching too many cop shows during my sleepless nights of evidence gathering. The Fairmont was exactly as advertised, sprawling, luxurious, the kind of place where even the landscaping probably cost more than my annual salary. Palm trees, fountains, valet parking, the works. I watched from the visitor lot as Rick and Sabrina checked in, as the bellhop took their bags, as Rick signed something at the front desk. I zoomed in with my camera, the good one now, the real equipment, and caught the name on the registration, Mr. and Mrs. Harris. Harris. They'd picked Harris. Not even creative enough to come up with something original. Just generic fake married couple name number 3 on the list of names people use when they're cheating. The audacity was almost impressive, except it wasn't. It was just sad and predictable and perfectly in character for two people who thought they were being clever when really they were just being obvious. I took approximately 47 photos. I know because I counted later, lying in my budget hotel room eating pizza I'd ordered from a place that definitely wasn't on any Best of Phoenix lists. 47 pieces of evidence, each one clearer than the last. Rick and Sabrina entering the hotel. Rick and Sabrina at check-in. Rick's hand on the small of her back. Her leaning into him like he was the only person in the world. The bellhop leading them toward what I'd later learn was the honeymoon suite, because apparently regular adultery wasn't enough. It had to be luxury adultery. I sat in my rental car in that parking lot for probably 30 minutes after they'd gone inside, just staring at my camera's display screen, scrolling through the photos like they were going to change if I looked at them enough times. They didn't change. They just stayed there, permanent and damning, and exactly what I'd come here to find. Then I did what any reasonable person in my situation would do. I opened a new text message to Erica Henderson, attached all 47 photos, and hit send. No caption needed. The picture said everything. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious or having second thoughts. Those would have required me to have some shred of emotional investment left in this dumpster fire of a marriage. But because the Holiday Inn's mattress had that specific quality of being somehow too soft and too hard at the same time, like sleeping on a marshmallow filled with rocks. Also, the people in the room next door were having what sounded like either incredibly athletic intimate relations or possibly moving furniture at 2 in the morning. Either way, it was loud, rhythmic, and a real testament to their stamina and my misery. So by 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely. Took a shower in a bathroom that was clean but depressing in that universal budget hotel way where everything is beige and smells vaguely of industrial cleaning products, and headed down to the lobby. The complimentary breakfast was exactly what you'd expect. Watery orange juice, coffee that tasted like it was brewed with water filtered through an old sock, and a waffle maker that 3 people were standing around watching like it was going to perform a magic trick. I grabbed coffee in a styrofoam cup that immediately burned my hand, proving that the laws of thermodynamics still applied even when your life was falling apart, and sat in the lobby pretending to read USA Today while actually scrolling through my camera roll from yesterday. The photos were good. Really good. I'm talking National Geographic quality documentation of infidelity. Sharp focus, good lighting, perfect composition of 2 people who deserved each other checking into a hotel under a fake name. I'd already uploaded them all to 3 different cloud services because I'm paranoid about technology failing at crucial moments, and I'd sent copies to Patricia, my lawyer, who'd responded at 11 p.m. Apparently divorce attorneys don't sleep either, with a message that just said, "Holy shit, this is bulletproof." Around 7:30, I decided to relocate my surveillance operation to somewhere with better coffee and possibly edible food. There was a cafe about 5 minutes from the Fairmont that had decent Yelp reviews and, more importantly, a clear view of the resort's main entrance. I'm not proud of the fact that I'd scouted this location on Google Maps before the trip, but I'm also not ashamed because preparation is the difference between success and looking like an idiot, and I'd spent enough time looking like an idiot for one marriage. The cafe was called Desert Bloom, which sounded like either a coffee shop or a retirement community, but it turned out to be actually nice. Local art on the walls, baristas who looked like they genuinely enjoyed their jobs instead of contemplating murder-suicide, and coffee that tasted like actual coffee instead of what coffee's distant cousin might taste like after a bad breakup. I ordered something complicated with oat milk and an extra shot of espresso because if I was going to confront my wife about her affair, I wanted to be properly caffeinated for it. I sat at a table by the window, positioned so I could see the Fairmont's entrance, but also look like I was just a normal person enjoying breakfast and not a man orchestrating the downfall of his marriage with the precision of a military operation. I ordered avocado toast because I was in a trendy cafe and apparently that's legally required. and scrolled through my phone like an artist admiring his gallery of revenge. Each photo was a masterpiece of betrayal, a perfect snapshot of two people who thought they were getting away with something. The composition on the check-in photo was particularly nice. You could see both their faces clearly, plus the signature on the registration form. Rick had nice handwriting for someone whose moral compass was apparently broken. Around 9 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Erica. Send him screenshots. He's calling me, but I'm not answering. How you holding up? I responded with a thumbs up emoji because words felt like too much effort, and also because I wasn't entirely sure how I was holding up. On one hand, I felt vindicated, justified, like I'd finally proven I wasn't crazy. On the other hand, my wife was 100 yards away, probably having breakfast with her boyfriend, and I was eating overpriced toast alone while planning the most awkward confrontation since someone invented family Thanksgiving dinners. I was contemplating ordering more coffee, my third cup, which was probably too beyond what doctors recommend, but significantly fewer than what divorce lawyers probably required, when I saw her. Sabrina, walking through the Fairmont lobby visible through the resort's glass doors, moving fast with her phone pressed to her ear and her face doing that thing it did when she was trying very hard not to panic in public. Her free hand was gesturing wildly, the universal sign language for everything is going horribly wrong, and I'm pretending I have it under control. I watched her pace back and forth in the lobby for maybe 2 minutes, still on the phone, her expression cycling through what I can only describe as the 5 stages of oh shit. Then she hung up, stood there for a second looking at her phone like it had personally betrayed her, ironic, considering, and started walking. Not back toward the elevators where I assumed her room was, but toward the exit, toward the cafe, toward me. Now, I'd imagine this confrontation going several different ways. In one version, I dramatically revealed myself at dinner while they were eating, maybe even had the waiter bring over divorce papers with dessert. In another, I waited until they were checking out and handed her an envelope in front of Rick like I was serving a subpoena in a legal drama. But watching her storm toward my location with her phone in a death grip and her face pale under what was probably expensive resort makeup, I realized the universe had its own timeline, and I was just along for the ride. She walked into Desert Bloom like a woman on a mission, scanning the cafe with the intensity of someone looking for either answers or an escape route. When her eyes landed on me, sitting there with my avocado toast and my coffee and my baseball cap like I belonged there, she froze. Actually froze, mid-step, like someone had hit pause on the remote control of her life. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish trying to remember how breathing worked. Mark? She said my name like it was a question, like maybe if she questioned it hard enough I'd turn out to be someone else, some stranger who just happened to look exactly like her husband sitting in a Phoenix cafe at 9 in the morning. Mark, what are you doing here? I took a sip of my coffee, nice and slow, savoring both the expensive oat milk and the moment. Oh, you know, I said casually, like I'd just run into her at the grocery store instead of caught her mid-affair in another state. Just thought I'd try the lobster. Everyone's been raving about it. Figured I'd come see what all the fuss was about. Her face went through several color changes, red to white to possibly green, and I could see her brain working overtime trying to figure out what was happening, how I knew, what I knew, and most importantly, how much trouble she was in. Spoiler alert, all the trouble. Every single bit of it. Her phone buzzed in her hand, loud enough that I could hear it from 6 feet away. She glanced down at the screen, and I watched all the blood drain from her face like someone had opened a tap. Even from my angle, I could see the message preview. Hope you two enjoyed your stay. Erica had perfect timing. I made a mental note to send her a fruit basket or maybe just split custody of our collective trauma. What did you do? Sabrina's voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper, and she looked at me with something between horror and disbelief. Mark, what did you do? I grinned. Couldn't help it. Really, the moment was too perfect, and set down my coffee with the deliberate care of someone who'd waited months for this exact conversation. Nothing much. Just finally gave you the transparency you always said we needed. You know, that whole communication is key to a healthy relationship thing you kept bringing up in therapy? Turns out you were right. Communication is important. So I communicated with Rick's wife. Shared some photos from my Phoenix vacation. Really opened up about my feelings and experiences. Very therapeutic, actually. She dropped into the chair across from me, didn't pull it out, didn't ask permission, just collapsed like her legs had stopped working, and stared at me with eyes that were starting to fill with tears. You followed me here? You've been watching us? That's crazy, Mark. That's stalker behavior. Stalker behavior. I repeated, like I was testing out the words to see how they tasted. Interesting take. I'd call it evidence gathering, or maybe due diligence, or, here's a fun one, confirming that my wife is a lying cheater who's been spending our money on hotel rooms with her coworker. But sure, let's call me the crazy one. That's definitely the problem here. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. How's Rick, by the way? He getting similar calls from his wife? Or is this just affecting you so far? Her phone buzzed again. And again. The messages were probably piling up. Erica had a lot to say, I imagined, and Rick was probably having his own meltdown in whatever luxury suite they'd charged to his credit card. Sabrina looked at her phone like it was a snake, then at me like I was the one who'd brought the snake to breakfast. This isn't how I wanted you to find out, she said finally, which might have been the most honest thing she'd said to me in months, and also possibly the dumbest. I was going to tell you. Eventually. When the time was right. Oh, absolutely, I said, nodding sagely. Nothing says right time like checking into a hotel under a fake name for a romantic weekend. That's definitely when most people come clean about their affairs. Classic timing. Right, because that's the real issue here. My timing in finding out, not your timing in deciding to cheat. I picked up my coffee again, more for something to do with my hands than because I actually wanted more caffeine at this point. My heart was already racing like I'd mainlined espresso straight into my veins. So let's talk about timing. You've been seeing Rick for what, 6 months? 7? I've got receipts going back to March, so at least 7 months. That's a lot of not the right time to tell your husband you're screwing your coworker. She flinched at the word screwing, which was rich considering she'd been doing exactly that in a 5-star resort, while I slept on a mattress that felt like it was stuffed with regret and broken springs. It wasn't like that. It just happened. We didn't plan it. Things with us were so bad. Mark and Rick was there, and he listened and... Oh, he listened. I interrupted, because I'd heard enough of this particular excuse in every cheating story ever told, and I wasn't about to sit through the director's cut. That's beautiful. Really touching. Your husband, the guy working 60-hour weeks to keep his business afloat, the guy who still cooked you dinner and bought you flowers and pretended not to notice when you came home smelling like another man's cologne. He didn't listen enough. But Rick with his expense account and his hotel rooms and his jewelry from Tiffany's, he listened. What a gentleman. What a hero. Someone should write a romance novel about you too, except it would get shelved in the fiction section under delusional garbage. Tears were streaming down her face now, and part of me, a small, stupid part that remembered when I actually loved this woman, felt bad about that. But the larger part, the part that had spent months being gaslit and lied to and made to feel crazy for trusting my own instincts, felt absolutely nothing. Or maybe felt everything, and it all just averaged out to a cold, calculated calm that probably should have scared me, but instead felt like the first honest emotion I'd experienced in ages. I never meant to hurt you, she said, which is what people always say when they've been hurting you intentionally for months and finally got caught. I know that sounds stupid, but I didn't. I love you, Mark. I do. This thing with Rick, it's different. It's exciting and new and convenient, I finished. And expensive, considering you've been using our joint account to fund it. Yeah, I noticed that too. All those team-building dinners and client meetings that cost $400 a pop. I've got a spreadsheet, Sabrina. Color-coded. It's very thorough. Patricia, my lawyer, was extremely impressed with my organizational skills. Said it was some of the best documentation she'd seen in 15 years of practice. So thanks for that, I guess. You helped me discover I have a real talent for forensic accounting. Her face somehow got paler, which I didn't think was physically possible, but apparently shock can do amazing things to human circulation. You have a lawyer already? You've been planning this. Planning. I laughed, and it came out harsh enough that the barista looked over with concern. I lowered my voice, leaned forward across the table. Sabrina, I haven't been planning anything. I've been reacting. I've been responding. I've been doing what any normal person does when they realize their spouse is cheating, gathering evidence, protecting my assets, and making sure that when this inevitably falls apart, I'm not the one left holding the bag. You planned this. You and Rick planned this whole elaborate setup with your fake business trips and your secret phone calls and your Mr. and Mrs. Harris routine. I just documented it. She reached across the table like she was going to grab my hand, thought better of it halfway through, and pulled back. We can fix this. We can go to therapy, work through it. People recover from affairs all the time. We can. We can get divorced, I said flatly, pulling an envelope from my jacket pocket and sliding it across the table between my half-eaten avocado toast and her mounting horror. Here, I brought you something. Think of it as a souvenir from Phoenix. A little memento of our time apart. She stared at the envelope like it might bite her. What is this? Freedom, I said, echoing the same line I'd use a month from now when this was all finally over and I could breathe again. Open it. Her hands shook as she picked up the envelope, and I watched her slide out the papers inside with the kind of morbid fascination you have when watching a car crash in slow motion. You know it's going to be bad, but you can't look away. The papers were divorce documents, professionally printed, legally binding, and here's the beautiful part, already signed. I don't understand, she said, scanning the pages with growing confusion and panic. These are signed. By both of us. When did I? She stopped, her eyes going wide as memory apparently kicked in. The tax forms. You said you needed me to sign tax forms 4 months ago. I needed you to sign documents, I corrected. I may have been vague about which documents. But hey, you always said I should communicate more clearly. And look at me now, being super clear. These are divorce papers, Sabrina. You signed them in June. They're notarized, witnessed, and according to Patricia, completely legally binding in our state. Congratulations, you've been efficiently processing your own divorce for months and didn't even know it. That's not legal. Her voice rose enough that other cafe patrons were definitely staring now, but I didn't care and apparently neither did she. You can't trick someone into signing divorce papers. That's fraud or coercion or… Actually, I said, pulling out my phone and opening a voice memo app that showed a recording dated June 15th. It's completely legal as long as the person signing had the mental capacity to understand what they were signing and did so of their own free will. Which you did, because I recorded our conversation that day. You want to hear it? You were in a great mood, just got a promotion at work, or at least that's what you told me. Though now I'm wondering if that was code for something else. And you literally said, and I quote, "Whatever you need me to sign, babe, just leave it on the counter and I'll take care of it." Then you signed without reading it. Which, by the way, Patricia says is on you, not me. Always read before you sign, Sabrina. That's like basic adulting. She looked like she was going to be sick. Actually sick, the kind where you can see someone's body deciding whether to commit to the nausea or not. You can't do this. The house, the accounts, everything we built together. The house is in my name, I said, really enjoying this part because I'd been waiting months to see her face when she realized how thoroughly she'd been outmaneuvered. Remember when we bought it and your credit was terrible because of all those student loans and credit card debt? Yeah, we put everything in my name. You've been contributing to the mortgage, sure, but legally speaking, it's my house. The accounts are split. I moved my half plus what you spend on your extracurricular activities with Rick. Your car is yours, my truck is mine. And the only thing we really need to divide is the furniture, which honestly, you can have most of it. I never liked that couch anyway. Her phone started ringing. Rick's name flashing on the screen with a photo of the two of them that she'd apparently saved as his contact picture, which was bold considering we had a shared iCloud account that she'd apparently forgotten about. She hit decline, but it immediately started ringing again. I need to take this, she said, standing up so fast her chair scraped against the floor with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. Sure, go ahead, I said generously, like I was giving her permission to answer her own phone. Tell Rick I said hi. Oh, and that his wife has already contacted his company's HR department with screenshots of his expense reports. Apparently, those luxury dinners and hotel rooms weren't actually approved business expenses, and his boss is very interested in discussing his creative accounting. Might want to give him a heads up about that. She looked at me like I'd just told her I'd burned down her house with her dog inside. You didn't. I didn't, I confirmed. Erica did. She's surprisingly resourceful when motivated by betrayal. We've been comparing notes. It's been very therapeutic. You two should try couples therapy. Oh wait, you can't, because Rick's probably going to be divorced and unemployed by the end of the week. Bad timing on that promotion he was supposedly up for. The phone kept ringing. She kept staring at me like I'd transformed into someone she didn't recognize, which was fair because I'd spent 6 months not recognizing the woman I'd married while she lied to my face over pancakes and pretended everything was fine. "I have to go," she said finally, her voice hollow. "We're not done talking about this." "Actually, we are," I said, gesturing to the divorce papers still sitting on the table between us. "That's literally the legal definition of being done. But hey, your lawyer can call my lawyer and they can talk about it. That's what lawyers are for." Patricia's very good, by the way. Comes highly recommended by 3 of my customers who've been through divorces. All of them said she's a shark in the courtroom and a genuinely nice person in consultation. You should probably get a lawyer too. A good one. You're going to need it. She grabbed the papers, shoved them back in the envelope with shaking hands, and walked out of Desert Bloom without another word. I watched her through the window as she stood on the sidewalk outside, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly while presumably talking to Rick and trying to explain how her husband had just destroyed both their lives over avocado toast and expensive coffee. I sat there for another 20 minutes, finished my breakfast, ordered one more coffee because why not, and thought about how I'd imagined this moment would feel. I'd expected vindication, triumph, maybe even joy. What I felt instead was tired. Just bone deep, exhausted, tired. Not sad, not angry, just done. Finished. Ready to close this chapter and move on to whatever came next. My phone buzzed with a text from Erica. "Rick just called me crying. Crying. This is the best day ever. Thank you for existing." I smiled, texted back, "Same to you. Coffee next week." "Absolutely. First round's on me." I left a generous tip for the barista who'd witnessed what was probably the most dramatic breakfast conversation she'd seen all week, walked out into the Phoenix sun that was already brutally hot at 10 a.m., and drove back to my hotel to pack. My flight home was that evening, and I had a business to run, a house to enjoy in peace, and a divorce to finalize. Sabrina could have Phoenix, the Fairmont, and Rick. I was going home. The envelope I'd handed Sabrina in that Phoenix cafe wasn't just symbolic. It was legally binding, notarized, and according to Patricia, about as airtight as divorce paperwork gets. See, for months earlier, I told Sabrina I needed her signature on some tax documents that required both our signatures for our joint filing. She'd been in a rush, heading out to another one of her late work nights, and had barely glanced at the papers before signing her name with that expensive pen her parents gave her for Christmas. What she'd actually signed were divorce papers. Blank ones, sure, but with all the legal language intact and her signature right there on the dotted line. Patricia had helped me fill in the rest later, division of assets, which was easy since everything was basically already separate, in terms that heavily favored me because, well, I had evidence of adultery and she had expensive mistakes. "This isn't fair," Sabrina screamed when her lawyer finally explained what had happened. "Neither is pretending to be married while auditioning for your own romance novel," I replied. The locks were already changed. Her name was off the accounts. And corporate ethics? They handled the rest. A month later, the house was quiet. Peaceful quiet, not lonely quiet, which is a distinction I'd learned to appreciate somewhere between changing the locks and realizing I could eat cereal for dinner without judgment. I'd started going to a cafe after work. That's where I met Lucy, a waitress with a crooked smile and laugh that made bad days survivable. She didn't know my story, didn't ask, just poured coffee and said, "You look like a man who needs pancakes." She wasn't wrong. Sabrina called once, crying. Rick dumped her. She was moving into a studio apartment. I told her, "You always wanted something minimalist." We both laughed. Well, I did. Now when people ask what happened to my marriage, I say, my wife diversified her portfolio, unfortunately, emotionally and physically. Sitting on my porch, watching the sunset, I realized revenge doesn't always need fire. Sometimes it just needs Wi-Fi, patience, and a good sense of humor. Sometimes it needs a lawyer named Patricia and a betrayed spouse named Erica who becomes your unlikely friend. Sometimes karma doesn't strike like lightning. Sometimes it just quietly changes the locks while you're busy living your best life. And honestly, that's even better.